in many years ago, I was at an event in UN in New York, and it was the NGO consultation at the beginning of CSW. And a woman from Afghanistan came onto the podium and was talking about the situation of women in Afghanistan. And she said, "Now you see me." And then she put on a burqa. And then she said, "Now you don't." And for me, that moment, you suddenly saw by what she did by putting on a burqa and taking off again was the difference between those who were visible and those who were not visible. And I think that is something that pertains to widows because widows are a huge demographic because we don't have data disaggregated by marital status at the moment in most countries. We don't know how many widows there are. And there's also customary law. And oftentimes women don't get marriage certificates. So we don't know how many widows there are because then when their husband dies, there's no record that they were, first of all, married. So widows are a vast, unknown group. But there's probably more widows, special rapporteur on widows. There's no UN office for widows. There's very little report widows, and it's very rare that we can get any language into any UN document on widows. And yet they're this huge demographic. So we have to ask ourselves, why is that, and what can we do about it? And yet, when we give a small amount of support to widows and widows organizations, they're amazing. There's one organizer that Widows' Rights International works with very closely. And it was founded in 2010. And in that time, it has expanded to many different villages. It has reduced violence against women, early and forced marriage, increased the education of girls, ensured that widows have their rights under the Tanzanian law, and so on, set up microcredit projects, social and economic development projects. It has achieved a huge amount, and it's run by widows for widows. So we know, and there's many, many examples of widows organizations around the world, just some support for widows, and they can achieve huge things. So first of all, we need to recognize what a huge demographic is. Secondly, we do need to recognize the dreadful abuse that widows face, the taboo about widows, the rights that are perpetrated against them, as in RITES, traditional harmful practices that are perpetrated against them, and we need to stop those. But we also have to recognize they are a powerful, wonderful group of survivors. And if only they can be given support, they could be challenged to achieve huge good. And the last thing that we have to bear in mind is that widows of all ages. In the UK, I think, and maybe other Western countries, when you say the word widows, you think we're meaning an older person. But actually, across the world, they're a huge age range. You can have a 16-year-old widow with two children. And with the increase in conflict, and with the increase of early and forced marriage, and with the increase of vulnerable widows who then marry off their girl child in order to make them safer, apparently, we're having an increasing number of young widows, and we have to work to ensure that they are protected. So I think I'm going to stop there because I know we're very limited with the amount of time we have, and also we have a great number of speakers who also want to share with you a great deal. So I don't want to go over my time, and I will finish there. Thank you very much, Carolyn.
Thank you, Zarin. Thank you for the work that you do, also for the information that you brought to us about this kind of area of widows that I know you've been working on for decades, and is, I think, finally coming to the, to a position of priority in the human rights discourses. So thank you so much. Are you staying on, Zarin, or you have to go for later?
No, I can stay for a while. Thank you very much, Carolyn.
Okay. So our next speaker will go with, because we have a nice balance, intergenerational balance. Our next speaker today will be Stella Harris. She is just sitting next to me. She is coming from the UK. But she is a passionate advocate for women and girls' rights, specific focus on education, gender equality, gender equity, and empowerment. She has various initiatives. The last time she came here to Geneva, she spoke actually about the situation of women in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This time she will speak of another area. And the title of her talk is Forgotten Voices. So, Stella, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Kashmir is a region located in South Asia, bordered by India, Pakistan, and China. The region has been a point of contention between India and Pakistan since 1947, when the subcontinent was partitioned. Both countries claim Kashmir in its entirety, but each only controls a part of it. This dispute has led to decades of ongoing violence, particularly in the Jammu and Kashmir regions, where women have suffered unimaginable human rights violations, including blindings, violence, systemic denial to healthcare systems, inhuman treatment, deprivation of participation to public life, and sexual crimes. And yet, up until 3 months ago in June this year, I had never heard of Kashmir until I came to the United Nations and met Ms. Scholl and her delegation through Carolyn. I learned about the brave work and the resilience advocacy that her and her delegation have been carrying out for decades. I learned about the stories and heard about women who have gone through unimaginable. And that highlights a massive problem. Whose stories are we amplifying? Whose voices are we choosing to put on the forefront of the news bulletins? And whose voices are we ignoring? Today I'm going to use my 5 minutes to amplify the voices of those who've been silenced for too long, to speak up for our sisters in Kashmir who, under the weight of conflict, have carried their stories like unsung songs, to the brave women on the ground in Kashmir, like others across the world who have caregiving responsibilities, are speaking up and saying, stop it, stop it, take care of our region, think about our children, think about our grandchildren, think about our daughters growing up without their fathers, think about their wives becoming widows of conflict. The women in Kashmir are our sisters of humanity. They bear the same desire for peace and for dignity, the right to live without fear, a chance to raise their children in a world that does not shatter at the sound of gun pellets. And yet for too long, the world has turned away, leaving their voices to fade into winds of silence. It pains me that I had never heard of Kashmir, a region ignored for its wounds, and at the heart of this pain are its women, who endure both the brutality of conflict and the burden of invisibility. So I ask you today, ladies and gentlemen, in the room and across the world, how long will we allow our sisters to remain unseen? How long will we stand silent while the region goes unnoticed, neglected? For every woman whose home is destroyed by violence, there's a future she must rebuild from the rubble. For every daughter who's watched her father disappear, there's a life she must carry without a father figure. Our sisters in Kashmir do not need our pity. They need our influence, our advocacy at the highest level, our voices to join with theirs to amplify the cry for peace and a chance to exist beyond mere survival. They are the silent pillars of strength who deserve to be heard, to be supported, not just by words, but by actions that matter. I call on all of us, to those who hold power in their hands, I urge you to look beyond the headlines, to hear the real stories that live behind the veil of conflict, to the women in Kashmir who wait for peace, justice, and empowerment. This is a clarion call for compassion, for responsibility, a call to end conflicts of wars started by men which disproportionately hurt women. Let us be voices in the rooms where they cannot speak. Let us be advocates in corridors of power where they cannot walk. Stand with our sisters as partners in the struggle, as allies in a fight for a life of dignity and peace. Because when we support the women in Kashmir, we support peace itself. When we lift up the marginalized and forgotten, we uplift the world. Our sisters are not asking for what's impossible. They are asking for what is right, for what is just, for what we all deserve, a chance to live without fear, to love without loss, and to dream without the shadow of conflict. Thank you for your time, ladies and gentlemen. Back to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Stella, for this clarion call that really to someone who just, as you said a few months ago, even discovered that situation. But we need to understand each other's plights in order to, arouse that kind of passion that you're bringing, actually. And I think that also this element of youth is something that I think we have to tap into that more. Thank you so much. Our next speaker will be, okay, we'll next go to Margaret Owen. She is a veteran human rights barrister with a focus on women and, again, especially widows. So this time we have a majority, I think, of real experts in that area, but also refugees, migrants, and women under occupation. She's the founder and the president of Widows for Peace Through Democracy, co-chair International Working Group of the UK Civil Society Women's Alliance, and she is the co-founder of the Every Women Treaty. So Margaret, you have the floor.
Is Margaret here?
Is Margaret here?
Margaret, you need to unmute.
She's here virtually, but I think she was here before, but she's fallen off. But she needs to unmute.
Okay, Margaret, do you hear us? Margaret? Should I go to, maybe I should go to
She is there.
She is.
She is there, but she is mute.
Margaret, you're mute. Okay, maybe I will go to the next speaker then, and we come back to you, Margaret. Huh? So let's move on to Wendy. Wendy Moman, who is a social activist and advocate. She is a trustee of Widows' Rights International and executive board member of UK Civil Society Women's Alliance and ambassador for the National Alliance of Women's Organizations. And she has many long list of amazing things that she's done, and even of things she is currently still doing. But maybe I will just give her the floor. Wendy Moman.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. Can you hear me?
Yes, well.
Thank you so much. So I wanted to talk just about a couple of things today. First of all, we're having this conversation, really, all of us together, because we really fully already embrace that this concept that humanity is really linked as one whole. This means we care about each other. And so the former speaker was talking about the women of Kashmir, asking us not just to care, but to do something to assist. And we do try to assist each other. People on this call in this seminar, we try to advocate for each other. We try to work with each other. We collaborate with each other. But not everyone takes this view. In fact, right now, governments around the world are decreasing their support for this idea that we are linked together as one humanity. And instead, they're investing in the kinds of governance that actually, at the international level, is actually quite dangerous to the cause of women and to the cause of people in general. And what we're really trying to do is to try to find governance at the international and national, local levels that actually enshrines the concepts that we are all who are in this seminar actually believe in. The well-being of all people, the safety of everyone, the flourishing of women and girls, and also to make sure that there is no conflict into which women and girls can be caught up and destroyed and their lives damaged and even lost. So all of us here want to have a peaceful, non-conflict world, and we are trying to achieve it. And the work that we're doing through all of our agencies, it seems to me, is at least trying to advance that concern. We do know that the number of conflicts going on in the world right now is very large. There's at least 50, they say 59 or 60, I think it's double that number of conflicts that are going on in the world because they're really talking about the kinds of conflicts that are perpetrated by men in open spaces. But I also want to talk a little bit about the kinds of conflicts that go on for women around the world. I'm going to focus on a place I know well, which is Iran. And to just remind you that the women of Iran are not free. They are persecuted every day just because they are women. They are forced to wear clothing that they don't wish to wear. They're excluded from, if you think of Afghanistan as well, excluded from schools, excluded from work, and persecuted for just being women. 41 years ago, there were 10 women in Iran aged between the ages of 16 years old and 50, but most of them were in their 20s. And these 10 women in 1983 were hanged just because they belonged to a particular religion, the Baha'i faith. Since that time, the things have deteriorated for those people and many others as well. And I just wanted to bring to your attention that just because people are not standing in a war zone where bombs are falling on them, which is a horrible thing and is happening in too many places in the world right now, they are also persecuted and their lives are being destroyed. And there is a campaign which is called Our Story is One. And it's about standing up for women in Iran, but also around the world. We are one people. Our story is one. It has always been. So hashtag Our Story is One is something to look at. I just want to read to you a poem from one of the Baha'i women now imprisoned. This is her second term of 10 years of imprisonment just for being a woman and a Baha'i. And this is her poem. It's called Hopeful Still. She was in prison for 10 years. She was released for a short time and re-imprisoned. Of course, imprisonment is not like here in the UK where I live. It's the kind of imprisonment where you're tortured every day. I am hopeful still, despite the old way of life and all the suffering that was with us. And the greatness of it, how large it appeared in that narrow space of small minds and cold hearts filled with deceit. Remoteness was all and restlessness. Then I began to see the world as a single heart. I saw the heart was broken, every soul searching for a ray of light. And I wondered, would anyone come to chase away the mists, sow seeds in this abandoned holy land? But even a slight drizzle of rain water the seeds of our longing. Though the pond mirrors the cloudy sky, I am hopeful still. Sometimes I think I feel a drop of rain. One day I will follow that drop to the sea, light the path with the glowing branch I hold in my hand. Even now, I am filled with hope. And this is a poem of imprisoned woman Mavash Sabet. Thank you.
blaming, but rather let's go forward together. Let's give those who have suffered the chance to feel our compassion. And anyway, I appreciate very much, Wendy, that you have spoken like this to us. Thank you. Our next speaker is something. Well, actually, I thought maybe we could go to. Yes. Lana, could I ask you to go next? Let me just quickly introduce you. This is Naila Ataf Kayani. Ataf Kayani. And she is a writer, a columnist, and a television anchor, and a human rights activist. So that is a big profile, huh? You have the floor.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we gather here today at a crucial moment in history. The global landscape is marked by conflict, crisis, and rising inequality.
So,
A report published last year by the UN Women highlights that over 600 million women and girls are now living in conflict zones, an alarming 50% increase since 2017. Throughout history, women have often been seen as passive victims of war and conflict, but nowhere is this suffering more evident than in Kashmir. In this region, women and girls endure a weight of violence, occupation, and repression. This conflict is not just about territory or control, it is about human dignity. In Kashmir, women have long been silent sufferers of multiple forms of violence, such as the loss of their loved ones and enforced disappearances, sexual abuse, and trauma of living in a heavily militarized zone. India has systematically used sexual violence, including rape, as a tool of war in Kashmir. Under laws like the Armed Forces Special Power Act, Indian security forces operate with impunity, allowing perpetrators to go unpunished. The mass rape in Konang and Poshpura in 1991 remains a stark example where no justice has been served. This violence causes deep psychological and generational trauma, aimed at breaking down the Kashmiri identity and social fabric. Despite documentation from human rights organizations, the Indian state denies these atrocities. International accountability is urgently needed to ensure justice for the women of Kashmir and hold perpetrators responsible for their crimes. One of the indigenous postdoc scholars who wishes to remain anonymous recently shared her deep frustration with the Legal Forum for Kashmir. With her consent, I'm sharing her thoughts. She pointed out that since the revocation of Kashmir's special status, coupled with the fact-finding reports revealing instances of sexual harassment against women, several leaders of the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party have made deeply misogynistic remarks. Among these were comments suggesting that Indian men now could marry fair-skinned Kashmiri women. These remarks, alongside the ongoing militarized control, reflect how the domination on Kashmir is often equated with the control over the bodies of the Kashmiri women. She emphasized how disturbing and alarming this situation is for her, as well as other women and girls in the region. Despite the bleak global picture painted by the UN report, there is hope. Data clearly shows that women's participation in peace processes leads to more durable and sustainable agreements. This aligns with the principles of UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which calls for the inclusion of women in all aspects of conflict resolution and peace building. Women's voices are not just necessary, they are essential for building a future that values peace over conflict. Now more than ever, it is time to move beyond words to action. Governments, international organizations, and civil society must do more than acknowledge the need for women involvement in peace building. They must actively prioritize and support it. This means funding women initiatives, pushing for their inclusion at negotiation tables, and holding perpetrators of gender-based violence accountable. Let us not just speak of women empowerment, let us build structures where women leadership is central to shaping the future. Let me take you back to Kashmir one more time. In this disputed region, While dominant narratives often portray women as victims, caught between the military and militants, it is crucial to recognize women's agency in resistance in everyday militarization of their lives. For example, many women in Kashmir were actively involved with the Association of Parents of Disappeared Persons, an anti-disappearance collective. Their collective mourning became a deeply political act of resistance as they demanded accountability and freedom. The voice was so strong that the government had to ban the organization. At a time when Indian state claims to base its decision on empowerment, Kashmiri women are speaking for themselves through their writings, resistance poetry, and participation in protest marches. They challenge the militarized state in their daily struggles. Their efforts mirror the spirit of Resolution 1325, which emphasizes the critical role of women in preventing conflict and sustaining peace. But as Natasha Kaul and Atazia ask, can we hear them? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Um, yeah, it's very good to hear from, also the positive current outcomes of some of this violence in Italy. And we have to really keep these issues alive, actually, until really there can be a full reconciliation, and that the women and men and families in those difficult, tragic conflict situations can really be properly empowered and really living full lives and children. Yes. So thank you so much for bringing that to us, news to us. I would like now to invite, is Margaret Owen on the call now?
She's there online.
Yeah, Margaret, are you there?
She isn't. I did contact a colleague to ask her to call her.
Why did you
Yeah,
call him? Why don't you call her?
yeah, we tried to do that.
Margaret, are you there? We can't hear you.
Margaret, can you hear us?
No, she's not actually here, I think, at the moment.
Okay, in that case, maybe we will go to our next speaker. That is Ms. Hadia Sultaj.
She's-
She is the president. She's on the phone. Okay, she is the president of Solidarity for Palestinian Human Rights Club at McMaster University in Canada. So she's bringing us into a new domain here. I think this is also the strength of this series of women, conflict, and human rights, that we could really, each time, we could bring in new, conflict zones, conflict situations. And she says that she is this organization that she has founded is the largest collection of youth in Ontario who are involved in advocacy and solidarity for the Palestinian people. So Haja, are you there?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me fine?
Yes,
Amazing. Thank you all so much for the opportunity to be here to talk to you, focusing specifically on the issues and deep pain plaguing both Kashmir and Palestine. This is a call for action and a call for an emotional awareness of what is going on in the world around us. And together, I want us to
I'm trying to find the phone. Stop, Hadia, stop.
You want Margaret now? Yeah. Hadia, could you hold that thought? We're coming back in 5 minutes, okay? Sorry. Okay. So, yes, Margaret, are you there?
Margaret, are you there?
Margaret?
Margaret, do you hear us?
Margaret, can you speak?
Margaret, are you there? She can listen from me.
Okay. I think we'll come back to you then, Hadia. I'm so sorry for the interruption.
It's okay.
Hadia, please, maybe start your thought again.
Yeah, Margaret is there now. Margaret is there now.
Okay.
Margaret started.
I'm so sorry.
So finally, Margaret is there. Margaret,
cardiac
Do you hear me?
complications.
Don't hear?
Okay,
Huh? Margaret is not getting our voice. You may start. You speak. Hello, Margaret. Just start.
okay, please speak. I don't.
आप बताते हैं
Will
उसको
you
कुछ.
please speak up, Margaret? The floor is yours. You can speak.
Can you hear me, Margaret?
I
Can you
can't
speak?
hear anyone.
I see, well, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Margaret, forget
are
me.
speaking.
I think you've been all talking. I can't hear anyone. I can't hear anyone, so I'm going to leave. I think it's all been said anyway. I can't hear any of you.
But we listen to you.
I can't hear.
We want you to speak, Margaret.
I can't hear anyone.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't hear.
Okay, we're very sorry about that.
I don't know what anyone's been saying. I don't know what. Well, I just speak, but I suppose you said it all. Can you hear me or not?
Yeah.
Yes,
Can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, if you can hear me. Well, I just talked for 5 minutes, but I gather that you've both been talking about widows, which is an issue I've been working on for the last over 30 years, ever since my husband died 34 years ago, when not a soul was talking about widows. And now, 34 years later, we've got more widows being created every single hour as I speak, every minute, because of armed conflicts, because of pandemics like COVID, and perhaps it's now monkeypox. And conflicts are creating more and more, not just widows of all ages, including child widows, but also uncounted numbers of half widows, who are the women who don't know what happened to their husbands. Are they in mass graves? Are they in prison? Have they been inducted? And down. The terrible increase in trafficking, in forced child marriages, goes on and on. I've just been at a meeting for the last 2 days at Cambridge University, where we're talking about the connections between criminal organizations, trafficking, sexual exploitation, the kidnapping of girls, the huge money that's made out of trafficking, not for sexual slavery, sexual exploitation, and for organs. And that all over the world, wherever there are widows, there is such abuse and discrimination that whatever international laws or modern laws, reform laws say, in so many countries, widows are outside the protection of the law because their lives are determined by highly discriminatory, patriarchal interpretations, misogynist and racist. Their lives are determined like that, and they have no access to the justice system. At Cambridge, we were talking about the land issues, the way in so many countries, widows cannot inherit, they cannot own land, and that makes them so impoverished. They have no way that they can even grow food to feed their children. And that's why we've seen such an increase in child marriage. In Afghanistan, the widows are so poor, they're giving away or selling their girl babies or leaving their girl babies to die. Yesterday, we met women from Ukraine who don't even know what's happened to their children who maybe have been abducted into Russia, who are also also victims of these huge criminal organizations that traffic women and children for sex. And today, when I'm speaking today, as a lawyer, as a human rights lawyer, I'm in a world now which is no longer based on the rules, where the very architecture of the UN is now almost completely discredited. And we have to think of other ways in which we can get women into the decision making. Who are the real victims of conflicts? The most vulnerable of all the women are the ones who have been bereaved, the widows. Very often they've also been rape victims. I remember during the Rwanda genocide, not only were they widowed, seeing their husbands murdered, but they were also victims of rape, where the men who raped them said, "We're not going to kill you, we're going to give you a slow death, we're going to give you HIV and AIDS." In many of these countries, at the moment in the Congo, where I was last year, over 60% of all the women are widows, living, even the camps for the IDP widows are full. They're not even inside the camps. We know that in all these countries where conflicts happen, widows are not at the peace tables. It's 24 years now since we have UN Security Resolution 1325. Many countries have made national action plans. Very few of them, I only can think of Nepal, maybe there are more, but hardly any of them mention in their national action plans that they are going to ensure that widows are at the peace tables. Widows have got to be at those peace tables. They've got to be at decision making. They've got to be on law reform panels. They're also, it's the widows who are the survivors of all these genocides, which are often femicides, who will later on be able to give testimonies, make accountable the people who have perpetrated these crimes upon them. I hope 2 years ago we were all excited that the General Assembly adopted a resolution on the treatment of widows. But that's just another resolution written on paper. Hardly anybody knows about it. The widows don't know about it. And there's no implementation, just like there's no implementation of 1325. 1325 is aspirational rather than effective.
Margaret?
We don't know. I don't know why people keep throwing around 285 million widows, approximately. This was a mad number that Lord Lumber produced in 2010. I mean, that's 14 years ago. They're still running around with 285 million. The point is, we don't know how many widows there are in the world because they are not counted. But there's lots of best practice about how they can be counted, where the widows themselves work with local authorities and district governments to count the widows. But for widows, and there's lots of best practice to be shared. My best partner is in Nepal, Women for Human Rights Single Women's Group, and they have counted their widows by empowering their widows to help and work and not just count their numbers, but actually profile their lives, find out who their support systems are, about their experience of violence, basically about what they want and what they hope for. And we know that what we do over the world, particularly in the global south and where their cultures,
Margaret, do you listen to me?
all women.
Can you hold up?
Margaret can't hear you.
We can't hear
Yeah.
you. You just have to
Okay.
mute her.
Yeah,
Okay. She's now muted.
okay, so, thank you, Margaret. Your message is very powerful always. But we have to go on to our final speaker. And we go back. Hadia, are you still there? I'm so sorry that we had to
That's
interrupt you
okay.
twice. You have the
Thank you
floor.
so much. Um, just going back to maybe the start, I just wanted to again thank you all for the opportunity to have me here, just to speak on the issues and the pain that we see plaguing both Kashmir and Palestine. And together, right now, I want us to be able to reflect specifically on the struggles of the women and children in these crises and conflict zones, in this form of my call to action. So, these regions, although they're separated geographically, they share a tragic commonality: the ongoing suffering inflicted upon their most vulnerable populations, the women and children, amidst decades of conflict and instability. In Palestine, the crisis has been part of daily life for generations, now having sprouted into a genocide upon their occupied lands. Women and children in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem live under the constant threat of violence, displacement, and deprivation. The impact on children is profound. Many grow up knowing nothing but pain and loss. Schools meant to be safe havens are often targets of destruction, ripping hopes of a different life from the youngest of the population. And the psychological toll is immeasurable, with children experiencing deep trauma, fear, and a loss of innocence. And our research has yet to understand how to begin to even tackle these mental health impacts that breach generations, stemming from these childhood conditions of conflict and grief. Women, too, bear the brunt of this violence. They face not only the physical dangers of conflict, but also the social and economic hardships that come with it. Many are widowed, left to care for their families in the face of overwhelming odds. The destruction of infrastructure means access to healthcare, education, and basic necessities is severely limited, further compounding their suffering. And in times like these, Western feminism falls short to understand the systems that play into what become these women's confined roles. Being a mother is not to explore love, nurture a new generation, or provide comfort. It becomes a means of survival, a continuation of a withering bloodline, and a determination to never cease to exist. Painfully similar in Kashmir, the decades long conflict has left a deep mark on its people, especially the women and children. The region, often described as one of the most militarized, has seen widespread human rights violations. Children in Kashmir, like those in Palestine, grow up in an environment where the sounds of gunfire and the presence of soldiers are part of everyday life. Their childhoods are marred by curfews, lockdowns, and the constant fear of violence. For them, the future doesn't hold any promise of education, developing skills, or contributing to the world around them. It is simply a fight for freedom. Women in Kashmir also face unique challenges. They live under the shadow of enforced disappearances, sexual violence, and the confines of the world around them. The Kashmiri crisis has also given rise to the phenomenon that has been touched on already of half widows, where women have husbands who have disappeared, leaving them in a state of perpetual uncertainty. These women must navigate the challenges of single parenthood and economic instability while dealing with the trauma of not knowing the fate of their spouses. Additionally, these women often become targets for further discrimination and violence because they are seen as without protection in their communities. In both regions, the international community has a crucial role to play. It is imperative that we do not turn a blind eye to the suffering of women and children in Palestine and Kashmir. More significantly, as youth, we must advocate for their rights, push for an end to the violence, and support efforts that prioritize their safety, well being, and future. This includes understanding the intersectionality between struggles and crises across the globe, educating ourselves on the shared roots of systemic oppression, colonial history, and settler violence to further bridge the gaps between the communities and the allies. We must develop our collective terminology when it comes to feminism and empowerment, stretching past the familiarities of North American issues and systems. Education, healthcare, and psychological support are critical in helping these communities rebuild and recover. It is essential to hold accountable those responsible for human rights violations and to support every peace building effort we can to include the voices of women and children. There are countless avenues for youth empowerment to learn, speak, and advocate through advocacy training, cultural and historical workshops, spaces, and facilitators grounded in intersectionality and global change. We must redirect our efforts into collective solidarity and intersectional awareness for all. The struggles of women and children in Palestine and Kashmir are not just local or regional issues. They are a global concern. They are a concern to every single person sitting in the room and sitting across the world around us today. Their stories should remind us of the urgent need for justice, peace, and humanity in our world. So let us commit ourselves to standing with them, amplifying their voices, and working towards a future where they can live fear-free from conflict and loss. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you. Very specific, but very broad and very powerful. Thank you. We have only a few moments left, but I think Ms. Shaw would like to say a few words. Our forward-looking strategies, and then I will close with a few words.
Thank you very much. We have a few words that these are the suggestions that an advocacy group based on women should visit Kashmir and collect data on the same lines as in 1991. A group of Indian women activists, lawyers, and under the leadership of Justice Kunde visited the Puran Poshpur and other places of Kashmir, and in their report they said, we can never forget the pain of women what they bear during the dark nights of 23rd February 1991. The families of disappeared persons should be provided free lawyers to fight their case. Widows and half widows should be given compensation allowance by the state government. UN should provide funds to their mandate holders to provide their children safe education and security and safety. Rehabilitation centers should be established for women who are facing trauma. International organizations like Red Cross and UN-funded organizations should be allowed to open their offices in different places of Kashmir and to collect for collection of data. International media, local media, and women organizations like Association of Families of Political Prisoners should also be allowed to work. Stop killing and change the human rights situation. Involve the UN mechanisms to build bridges in the torn society. The common friends of India and Pakistan should come forward to start a dialogue, and primary party should be the Kashmiris, and they should be involved. Women representatives should be the part of dialogue. The growing concern even at the people's level in India and Pakistan are also having concern to resolve the Kashmir issue permanently. And lastly, an honorable solution is possible if the leadership is able and the G5 countries will use their diplomatic channels. Don't make it a partnership of trade with India, but partnership on the basis of human values, human rights. Dialogue and engagement is powerful tool to provide peace, stability, and freedom to the people of the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, maybe just one or two thoughts. Thank you for everyone for coming. There will be an event on widows here at the United Nations on the 18th and the 17th and 18th of October. You can find it on info if you're interested. But maybe just a few closing thoughts for myself, for my own committee. Violence, of course, cannot be tolerated. And women, I think especially as mothers, heads of families, we understand this by instinct and by experience, and we are a powerful group when we can have a safe place, an opportunity, a platform to listen to each other. It's so important to listen to the voices of victims, and that we as NGOs, I'm getting the stop sign, we as NGOs have a responsibility here. You can see when we invite people to speak at the United Nations, of course they have the sense that the problems can be solved because it's going to be voiced at the United Nations, but we know that's not the case. We have to keep fighting, actually, and